This is part 2 of the Flexbox page project. In part 1, you downloaded the Flexbox page zip folder, which has some images in it, and used those to create the HTML for a web page, which looks like this when you're finished, with a logo, site title, the navigation, and then some headings and some images with a footer at the bottom. Once you're finished with this part and we add the CSS and Flexbox, you'll end up with a site that looks like this. Same stuff, same logo, same site title, you got your navigation, big hero image, a call to action, the different types of classes, the footer. And also, if you go ahead and stretch this page, you'll notice that it's responsive. Once we get to a certain size, the navigation kind of breaks down. These are shrinking, so is this. And then, the navigation will go to like a mobile size. These are taking up room and kind of wrapping to the next row. So that's what you're going to end up with in the end. So let's build this thing. So the first thing that we're going to do, and by the way, feel free to change, the colors and the fonts to your liking, but everything else will look pretty much the same. So first thing that we're going to do is go here to brackets and open up the previous files. So we'll do File, Open Folder, and just go and figure out wherever it is that you saved the first part of this project. Mine is in this Flexbox page. I'm going to open up that folder, and there are my images, and I have my Flexbox page with the HTML, and I've also got the style sheet, which nothing is currently in. First thing that I'm going to do is go in from the previous project. If we go ahead and launch this, you'll notice that on the bottom of the page, in the first part of the setup, we put the icons as their own paragraph or above the paragraph for like the phone number and the web page. We're actually going to move those so they're just side by side. So we're going to take the icon down here in the footer, and we're going to cut that and just paste it right inside the paragraph and then put a space. And we'll do that for both of those just to simply have them side by side next to that in the footer. I think that'll look a little bit better for us. Okay, everything else in here should be pretty good to go, except we're going to add a few things that we're going to need for the Flexbox. So inside of Flexbox, the way it works is once you tell a parent element, like this header, to have a display of flex, it will flex the items, the direct children tags or items inside of it. In this case, it would be the image, the H1, and then all of the navigation. I actually just want to flex the navigation to the right, and I want to put the image, which is the logo, and the header to the left. So I actually need to wrap this inside of a div tag. So we're going to put a div here, we'll give it a class, and we'll call that class header left. And then I will put that closing tag below this. Whoops, we'll actually put it below there. Okay, so you can see that now we have that the logo and the site title inside of a div, which will be one of the flex items, and then we'll have the navigation as the other. So we'll float the logo and that to the left side and the other part to the right side. In addition to that, I think we don't need to actually add anything else as far as setup for the Flexbox goes. So we should be good to go, and we can probably just add everything else here to the CSS. So to start this off, I'm going to go ahead and put in a bunch of comments inside of here just to make this easier to navigate. So we're going to put in an HTML comment. And I'm just going to add a little bit of style to this. Which makes it easier to actually see on the page. You can do whatever you want, just a normal comment will be sufficient. I just like to make these stand out so that I can easily navigate to different sections of the page. So there's one for body, and I'm going to go ahead and put the rest in now and pause this, not to take too much time. Okay, now that we have that, let's go ahead and start putting this together. So I'm going to start up here in the body section and add some rules for the overall site. And the only thing I really want to do there is I'm going to talk to the body tag, and I'm just going to say margin of 0, so that way there's no margin that the browser is adding to it. You're probably not going to see much change here. Next, we're going to start adding all of the rules to the header. So let's start there, and we're going to first speak to the header. Right, and if you recall, if we look back here in the HTML page, the header holds the logo, the site title, and then it holds the navigation, and then those social media icons. So all of this stuff here. So we've got a header, which will talk to everything in there first. So inside of the header, let's go ahead and make the background color for the header. So you can either put background or background-color. And I'm going to use this gray color so you can actually see the logo. I think that'll work for us. And I actually want the color of my text to be white. So put in color white. And that's working so far, great. Next thing we're going to do is put in a display of flex. So right off the bat, we're going to start using Flexbox here. And you'll notice as soon as I do that it kind of pops the navigation up to the right and all the other stuff up to the left. Still doesn't look good because we need to do some sizing, but in fact, let's comment that out for just a second. Put a couple slashes there so that stops working for the moment. From there, let's go ahead and next we're going to come here and we'll talk to the header div, right? And if you remember what the header div is, we go back and look. That is the division, the div tag inside of the header. So that's the logo and also the site title, right? So we can do something with that, which we'll do in just a moment. And then just to make this make more sense, we'll leave that for a second and we'll put in header image to talk to the logo, because inside of the HTML we have header and then there's only one image in here. So I could say header div image, but I'm just going to say header image to talk to that. So inside of the header image, we are going to give it a height of 50 pixels, much more manageable size, and we will give it a margin right of 20 pixels. That's going to push that's going to put a little space next to it so that once the site title goes up next to it, it doesn't sit right against it. And then we're going to do a margin top to kind of push it down just a little bit from the top to kind of help center it. Right, pushes it down just a little bit off the top, as you can see. So our image is looking fine, and that's done. And now that we have this working, we can actually add the Flexbox back up here in the header. So I'm going to take that back off, and you'll see immediately they kind of pop up. They're both here on the left side, and they're looking pretty decent. The next thing I want to do is make it so my Web Academy title, right, comes up next to the logo on the side of it. Now remember, here's how we're going to do this. If you put the display of flex on a parent tag, it's going to apply to the children. So we have it on header, which is why the div and the nav are floating next to each other. So if I put that same thing on this header left here, on this div, it will make these two float next to each other, which are the logo and the site title. So we're going to come up here, and inside this header div, right, we're going to go ahead and put in display of flex, and you can see that makes it go up next to it like that. And from there, let's add a few more things. I want it to, we're going to put in display or let's put in justify content, and we'll do flex start. All right, that's going to make sure they start here to the left side. So these two will start over here to the left. And we'll do a text flex wrap. Which will allow them, if there's not enough room, to wrap down to the next line in case they run out of room, which probably won't be the case here. So everything's looking pretty good there. Now, up here on the main header, right, these two are sitting right next to each other, which I do not want. I want this to the left and this stuff to the right. If we go into header here and we put in justify content, I could say flex end, and that's going to push it all to the end, just kind of like flex start pushed these two to the left of that. But instead of doing that, I actually want to do space between, and that's going to push one to the far left and one to the far right, which will work pretty well for us. And then I'm going to put in an align items, which is also part of Flexbox. We're going to tell it to be centered. You can see that centers this inside of the box right here. And then we're going to do a padding just to give it a little bit of space all the way around it. A little bit of padding so it pushes it off the top and off the sides for both, just to give it a little bit of space. So that is looking pretty good. Okay, so it's starting to take shape here. Next, we're going to come down. We're going to go to talk to the H1, that main site title. So we're going to say header H1. And for this, we're going to make it a bit bigger. So I'm going to do a font size of, so if I do a font size of 1M, you'll notice like it makes it smaller, right? So I'm going to do 3.4. M's are relative, like if I put in 1M, you see what it does. If I put in 2 M's, it's based off of, it's a relative size measurement. So we're going to put in 3.4 M's. That makes it a bit bigger. That looks good. And then from there, let's do a margin of 0. And you can see what that did. Before that, it's got a default margin above and below it. So I'm going to zero that out to make it nice and level with the logo. And then from there, let's do some justify content, and we're going to center that. Now, right off the bat here, I'm going to go ahead and go get a Google font for this. Change it up just a little bit. So let's go to Google Fonts. And I'm going to pick something that is a display only. I'm going to get just the displays, the more unique ones. And this is the one I think I used before. So this big shoulders inline display. And like I said, you can use something else if you'd like to. I want the biggest and the most bold. So I'm going to select this one. That adds it. You know, you can always add more, but then you can come to here. So I'm going to take this link. I'm going to copy that. And remember, that needs to go in the HTML file up between the head tags. So I'm just going to put a space here. And I'm going to paste that in there and save it. And that's all I need to do there. And then I need to take this font family, and inside of the header H1 right here, I'm going to paste that font family right there. And you can see that applies it here. So that's looking good. Okay, next part, let's work on, so that looks like it's finished. Let's work on the navigation over on this side. So I'm going to go down a bit further, and we're going to type in header nav, because we're going to start adding rules. Like here's the header, and then you have the nav. So just the navigation section, we're going to give rules for all of that. And then we'll work on just the navigation items. And then we'll work on the social media icons, which are something different. So let's go to header nav, and from there we're going to put in a display of flex, and you can see that pops those icons up next to them. They're below it before. I add that, puts them next to them. And then we're going to say flex wrap, and we're going to tell them to wrap. So if there's a case that they run out of room, once we make them larger, that the social media icon, they'll wrap down to the next line, right? So this item will go below the navigation if need be. All right, next up, let's go put in header nav UL. So now we're talking to just, right, if you look in here, header nav UL, we're talking to just the list items themselves, the actual navigation items. So I'm going to say list style type. We're going to put in none. That removes the bullets off of those items. And then after that, we're going to put in align self, and I'm going to put in center. Try to keep those centered a little bit, and that didn't look like it did much. We're going to come back down to header nav UL. So we're still talking to whoops, ULLI. So now we're talking to the list items that live inside of the navigation. So header, nav, UL. Now we're talking specifically to home, about, lessons, contact. So from there, we're going to do a margin right. Put in some 10 pixels to kind of push them a little bit away from each other once we make them go inline. So let me show you that. Maybe we'll do that first. Let me comment this out. So a couple slashes. Oops. Inline, and you can see now those items all go inline. And if I take this comment off of there, and you can see now it kind of spreads them out and puts a little bit of space between each of them. Okay, next we're going to talk to, right, we were talking to the list items. Now we're going to talk to the links themselves. So you can see inside of their nav ULA, we're talking to the links. So that whole part of the button. So let's keep going down to the next line here. And header, nav, we're going to talk to the links that live inside there. And we're going to add a color. That blue isn't going to work. So white, there we go, looks much better. And let's make them a little bit larger. $20 pixels, oh, that sounds great. Font family, for now let's put in, I'm going to put in the sans serif, just something that doesn't have those edges, the decorative edges on it. Right, you can see how that changes it a little bit. Font weight, I'm going to make it bold, so they're a little bit darker, a little bit thicker. And I'm going to do a text transform, which means you will be able to change that to make it lowercase, uppercase, different things like that. So I'm going to actually, you can capitalize the first letters if they're not. I'm going to make it uppercase, so they're all capitalized. And I'm going to do text decoration, which will allow me to remove the underlines underneath the bullet or underneath the navigation items. So I'm going to go to none. So then we've removed that now. And finally, let's put in padding on the bottom of 1 pixel or something like that. Okay, great. Starting to take shape, starting to look pretty good. Next part, we're going to give it a hover state so that when we roll over it with the mouse, it actually does something. So header, nav, A, and then you need to put a colon and no spaces and put hover. So we've got a pseudo class, a special effects class here. And we're going to put in a color. And like I said, you can pick something if you like something better than this. I'm going to put in 82D4FA, and I've got, it's like a blue that kind of works as the hover state for that. So it looks pretty good. And then we got just a little bit more that we're going to do here. So if you look back outside in the HTML, we've got the nav, and we're working with the UL. Now we're going to work with the nav, the div that lives inside the nav, which is all the social media icons. Inside there, we've got a link, and inside that, we've got this I tag, which is the icon. So from there, just a couple more things, and then the header will be finished. We're going to go to header, nav, and now let's talk to the div that lives in there, which holds those social media icons. I mean, we could put in dot social, saying the class, the social class inside of that div, but we don't need to, so we'll leave that. And I'm going to go in there and just say align self, and we're going to center that. See that, push them down so that they're in line with the other items. And then the last thing to do to finish this off is we're going to say header, nav, I. So we're talking now to the icons themselves. $10 pixels, which basically just gave each of the icons a little bit of space on the left, kind of spaced them out just a little bit. And since these icons also live inside of a link, and I gave it a hover state right here of blue, when I hover over those also turn blue. So there we go, we have got the header finished. Next, we're going to do the hero, the big image that lives right below that. So if we look here in the HTML, so we finished the complete header section. Now we're going to go to this section with the class of hero, and we're going to just basically add a little bit of text and give it a background. So inside the style, I'm going to go down to my hero section in here, and we're going to put in section. And I've got multiple sections in my page, so I need to be specific. I'm putting .hero because that's the class that we put. I could just put .hero and that would work, but I'm going to leave it as section.hero. From there, we're going to put in a background image. And I'm going to do URL. And it's going to say, okay, what image do you want? I'm going to click on my images, and I'm going to pick the one that's named hero. And you can see it starts to show up here. There's not enough room for it yet. Next thing I'm going to add, semicolon, is background size. Okay, I'm going to put cover, and watch what it does. That will kind of shrink it so it fits the size. That way it will be responsive and it will adjust to the size of your browser. Let me go ahead and comment that out for a second. We'll add that back in a moment. And then we're going to do a height. So there's more room for that image to live. You could put in a specific height, but I want this to be relative to the size of who's viewing it. So I'm going to put in 50 VH. So that is based upon the height of the viewport or the screen. So it's like 50% of that, right? So it's going to be about that large. If I come in here, I'm going to take this comment back out. Notice it now responds to that. If I start to move this page, you'll see that it's going to actually grow inside of there, right? The image will stretch to fit. So that's looking pretty good. From beyond that, let me snap this back over to the side. We just need to add some rules for our H2 that lives inside of there. So we've got section.hero, and we're going to speak specifically to the H2 tag. And what are we going to do with this? Text align. In fact, let's give it a color first so we can see it. There it is. You can see it up on top. And let's give it a font size of 3 M's. We're going to make it a bit bigger. And then I'm going to give it a text align to the right. So it sits over there on the right side. Give it a little bit of padding so I can kind of place it where I want on the page. So I'm going to put 100 pixels, push down 100 pixels from the top, 120 pixels from the right. So it pushes it in that far. 0 from the left, 0 from the bottom. And that way we kind of got a better placement on it. I'm also going to add a shadow to make it pop off a little bit. So I'm going to add a text shadow, and we're going to put in 4 pixels by 4 pixels. That's kind of the, you can see the offset, how it kind of pushes it on the offset there. So it's like the X and the Y. And then we're going to do 8 pixels, which is the spread, which kind of makes it more, it spreads out the shadow so it's not such a hard edge. And then you need to put in the color for the shadow. So in this case, I'm going to do 444, which is the same color as my header. So there we go. Got a little bit of shadow that pops it off. Here's the before and after so you can see it. Put it commented out. So just a little bit kind of pops it off the page. And then lastly, we're going to do, you can see there's a space up here between these two, and that's because of the H2. So if I click on this H2, you should be able to see it. So if I click on here and come to the H2 and click, you can see that it's not showing up. But that's what's causing it. The H2 is pushing it down. There's a margin on the top. So if we go here and say margin top and put in 0, that will pull it all the way up to the top. So that is looking excellent so far. So hero section done. Next, we're going to make all these classes work and functional. So let's go down to the main content section. And we're going to first talk to, see what we've got here. We've got main, and inside of there we've got a section, 3 different sections. In each section there's an H3 header, right? Here's your header. You've got an image, and then you've got a little paragraph underneath that. So let's go inside of main. We're going to first talk to main, the whole, all of it, and we're going to say display, and we're going to make this flex. So it actually can flex with the page. And then the next thing we're going to say is flex wrap. and we want it to wrap. So if there's not enough room, it'll actually wrap. So let me comment that out for just a minute so you can see what that does in a moment. That's all we need there. And then we're going to come down and we're going to put in main section. All right, so we're going to talk to all three of those different sections, and we're going to put in a flex basis, which is basically like putting in a width. So this is telling it what width to start at. All right, so those should be that size. It's not working yet because our images are pretty big. So let me go put the rest of these in and show you what we're going to do. So we're going to talk to the main section H3 at some point. We're going to give that some rules to make it a different size. And we are also going to talk to the images that live in each of those sections. And then finally, we're going to talk to the paragraphs in each of those. So first, let's make the image a bit different size. So in the main section image, I'm just simply going to tell it to have a width of 100% of whatever space it can live in, right? And since we made this display flex, they all pop up next to each other. So just by giving that, right? And you can see we've got an H3 above it, we've got our image, and then we've got our paragraph below it. So that's by adding that. And they're all 250 pixels. Okay, we've said, hey, you can only be 250 pixels to the sections. And since each section is only that large, each image is also 250 pixels because it's taking up 100% of that room currently. Okay, so let's go ahead and work with the H3 for just a second. So let's say font size, and we're going to say 1.5 ems, and that makes them a little bit bigger, as you can see. And then we're going to do a text align, and we'll do a center to center them over top, which looks good. Let's go work with the paragraphs for just a second. On the paragraphs, let's do a font size of 1.2 ems, make them just a little bit bigger. That looks pretty good as well. And then really the last thing we need to do here is go work with the main section here, add some more rules to this. So let's add flex grow, which is a Flexbox property. And I want that to be 1, so they all grow at the same rate. So they start at 250 pixels each section, and they are going to grow to evenly fill the available space. So just by adding that flex grow of 1, now if I drag this, you can see no matter how big I make it, those are going to flex to fit. And if I go super small, they just, they keep shrinking. But if I add that flex wrap to the main, as you saw before, now if it gets below this 250 pixels, it's not going to keep shrinking. It's actually going to wrap it to the next line, and then that bottom item will take up all the room. If I keep shrinking it, eventually they'll all three be in a line for something like a mobile device. So that's by adding the flex, allowing them to wrap, and then just adding a flex grow of 1 for each section so they grow evenly. From there, we got a few more things to add to this main section. We're going to add a margin of 10 pixels all the way around, just to add a little bit of space, as you can see, between them and around them. And we're going to add a border just for style, and you can change your border up however you'd like. I'm going to put in a 6 pixel border. It's going to be double lined. Let's do solid to start with. And I'm going to make it the same color as my shadow and my header. So you can see that that's a solid one, right? I'm actually going to make mine double. I like the look of that. And go to the next line, add something else, a border radius. What a border radius does, it's going to round the edges. So I'm going to put in, 25 pixels. And you can see what that did. That actually just rounded the edges of those boxes. So that's looking pretty good. And we'll add just a bit more. I'm going to add some padding, because on the inside you can see the text sits up against the edge, which I don't really like. So let's add 10 pixels of padding. You can see that adds a little bit of room between the pictures and the text to give a little bit of space. And then we're going to add a color for all the text in there. I'm going to add that same 444 gray color, so it's just a little bit softer than black. And we're going to do a margin on the top, which is going to push these boxes down away from this hero image a little bit, give them some space. So we're going to do 40 pixels there. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. Do margin bottom of 40 pixels. Just give a little bit of space below it as well. And that section is now done also. Right, looking good. We've got a pretty good looking website. Last thing we need to do as far as this layout goes is the footer section. So let's go down to the footer section and start with those rules. So we're going to look at that, and what have we got? We got a footer with 3 different paragraphs inside of it. And inside of each paragraph, we've got an icon with some text. So let's go back here, and we're going to first talk to the footer. And from there, we're going to put in a background color. And I'm going to put in that same color, 444. You can see it shows up. I'm going to put in a color of white. And from there, we're going to make this display. So I'm going to say display and put in flex. Watch what happens to those. They all pop up next to each other. The default for flex items is row. If you want them to actually stack, you can put in, you can actually tell it to be a column, and that would work as well. So there that is. Next, we're going to put in flex direction, like I was just mentioning. And we're going to tell it to be a column. So now they actually are stacked. And then we're going to align the items. Another Flexbox property. We're going to align those in the center. There they go. And we're going to put in some padding. And we're going to say 20 pixels, which gives it a little bit of room between the top and the bottom. So we've got a little bit of space. All right, now let's talk to the footer and the paragraphs inside of the footer. So all 3 of those paragraphs, I'm going to say margin, and I'm going to put in 4 pixels for the top and bottom. And I'm going to put in 0 pixels for the left and right to pull those closer together to each other. And then we are going to also put in a font family of sans serif, just like up there on the navigation items, so they don't have that decorative slashes on the edges of the letters. And then last, we're going to talk to the icon in each of those lines, because they're really, really close to the, the words and the numbers. So we're going to put in a margin right of 8 pixels, and you can see that just pushes them away a little bit from the text. So there we go. We have got now a pretty functional site. If we take the site and flex it, you can see it works pretty well. The images are responsive, and these Flexbox items here in the middle are responsive. Everything looks pretty good. You'll notice though that up here on the top, something kind of happens to the navigation. It doesn't look real great as you shrink it. So we're going to add some media queries so that it changes at different sizes. So we'll fix that next. So we're going to come down here into the media queries section, and let's start working with that. So the first thing we'll do is add rules for when it's 1024 pixels at a max width of 1024 pixels. So we'll do at media screen only, screen and max width of 1024 pixels. Right, and then we're going to go ahead and put our curly brackets, and then remember every single rule that we want to take place at that size, right? When it's 1024 or smaller, then we want to put those inside of here. So my first rule, I'm going to work with the header. Okay, this is rules for the header when it's 1024 pixels or smaller. So let me try to show you that. So we're going to do a flex direction, and when it's that size or smaller, I actually want this to go into a column. Okay, you're not seeing anything happen because I must not be quite at that size. So there we go. Let me get it to that size. So when we're that size or smaller, you can see that if you look here inside of the header, we put a flex on this so that the div, right, these 2 items, and the navigation floated one to the the far left and one to the far right. But now I've told it that when it's that size or smaller, that I wanted it, instead of being a row, to go into a column. So that goes on top, that drops down to the bottom. That looks pretty good at that size, so we'll leave that. We got some more things that need to happen. Let's talk to the text here. Okay, so we're going to go in and add another rule. So I'm going to go below that, and I'm going to say section dot hero, and then the H2. So we're going to talk to that text, and we're going to say text align. So when it's at that size, I just want that text to go right in the middle. And I'm also going to add some padding to it, some different padding here. So we're going to say 60 for the top, so it stays pushed down that far. But then I want the right, the bottom, and the left to all be zeros, so it stays basically in the center. Now, beyond that, let's keep going here. We're going to go to our next set of rules. So that's pretty much the only change we're going to make here, is when that happens, that's going to pop to the middle of the screen. And then we've got this thing that collapses down as well. Okay, so next we're going to go in and add another rule below that whole set of rules. So we're going to do at media screen. In fact, we can just take this line and copy it and paste it right here. And we're going to change this down, so at 768 pixels or lower, we're going to have another set of rules. So I need the closing tag here. Let's open that up and make some new rules in here. So next we're going to do another header rule. And we're going to put in a flex direction of column once again. And let's actually break that down to a size that's closer to that, so you can kind of see. So we get something like that. So we're going to make that column. And we're going to do padding left. Say 0. And a padding on the right is going to be another 0. I'm just canceling out the rules up top so that the padding on the left and the right up here go away. And then we're going to make a new rule in there. We're going to say header nav. And inside of there, we're going to do flex direction of column. And notice what that did. So if you look back in here, we have header, nav. So we had a flex on these two. So these two items were going up next to each other. But now we're saying, hey, at this size, we don't want you to do that anymore. We actually want you to go into the layout of a column. So now they go one above the other. So that's working. And next, we're going to do a width of 100%. So I can take up the full room for that section. Okay, next thing we're going to put in is a header nav. We're going to talk to the unordered list inside of there, which you can see is the list items themselves. And we're going to put in padding of 0 and a margin of 0. We're just canceling out things from above. And we're going to put in a margin bottom of 8 pixels, just to kind of push those down once we get this inline. And then we're going to do a width of 100 pixels. Okay, and you can see that's going to try to take up the full width of it currently, which is what we want, and you'll see why in just a second. So now we're going to talk to the list items themselves instead of the whole list. And when you guys are coding your own sites, you might, kind of move around and do a piece here, a piece there to kind of watch it take shape. So from here, I'm going to do display, and I'm going to display these block. And you see that makes them stack, right? We're no longer using display flex, we're using block, so they stack. And then after we do that, we're going to do a padding of 10 pixels to kind of give them a little bit of room so they don't, they're not basically touching. And then we're going to add a margin of 0. And then we're going to add a text align of center to put them in the middle of the page. And then we're going to do a border bottom of, let's see, 1 pixel. We'll do solid and white for the color. And you can see that just adds a line below each of those items. Okay. Next, I want to actually add a hover state to this so that not only does the link turn blue, I want the whole section to change colors like it might do on a mobile device. So we're going to add header nav ul li because we want the whole list item, not just the link itself, to have a hover state. So hover, put in your pseudo class, and we're going to say background is going to be a shade of gray here. And if I save that and I hover over it, you can see the whole entire list item, no matter where I'm at in it, will change. All right, so there's a hover state. And beyond that, we just got one more thing to add. If we come here and put in the section hero h2, we're going to talk to that and basically tell it, because it's a little bit large here, so we can say text align center, and then we can do padding of, let's say, same thing, we're going to say 60 pixels, and we're going to say 0, 0, 0 for the right, bottom, and left. And then we're going to change the size to 2.4 ems, make it just a little bit smaller so that it fits nicely. And if you noticed, I think before when I had this sized out, it wasn't quite perfectly in the center. That's because I forgot to put pixels up here. There we go. And now it's perfectly in line. And it looks like everything is working. And let's test this out and see. So if we stretch this, once it gets above 1024 pixels, you can see how the navigation looks. Everything looks good here. As I start to collapse this, these things shrink, this image shrinks. And these items will kind of start stacking on each other and taking up the full width until we get there. Everything looks good down the footer. At a small size, you've got your kind of mobile navigation, smaller call to action here, this H2. Make it a little bit bigger, that gets larger. These just stack on top of each other and then get even a little bigger, and now they're out to the side. So looks pretty good. So that's it. Like I said, feel free to use different fonts if you want, different colors and things like that as well. So have fun with it, and hopefully you learn a lot.